Hi, my name is Micah White, and my presentation will be on the stress of dress codes. According to the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, more than 1 in 3 high school students had experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in 2019, a 40% increase since 2009. In 2019, approximately 1 in 6 youth reported making a suicide plan in the past year, a 44% increase since 2009. This increase in reports shows that the mental health of high schoolers has been steadily decreasing over the past couple of years. Looking at specifically ages 17 through 19, females have a higher prevalence of mental disorders compared to their male counterparts. This partially could be because of dress codes. According to Ewing, students who cannot reach the ideal body standards set by dress codes go through a process in which they deeply internalize their wrong body as part of their subjectivity. This deep internalization could lead to a multitude of mental disorders, including body dysmorphia, eating disorders, and a general hate towards one's own body. Not only can these body standards set by the dress codes affect mental health on their own, Morris found that the students whose bodies do not fit the norm are alienated, and this distancing can lead to resistance, which educators may then perceive as oppositional, and a dangerous cycle of discipline and resistance is perpetrated. This cycle then will affect the student's future school life for the entire time that they are in school. Identifying this cycle led me to my research question of how do dress codes affect the mental health of females taking high school AP classes in the United States. Now, the reason I chose to specifically look at females taking AP classes is that AP classes are typically seen as the hardest classes available in high school. According to Stanford Honors graduate Haley Edwards, there is a lot of material to cover in AP classes, so they tend to be more challenging than regular classes, especially courses like AP Calculus, AP Biology, AP Physics, AP US and World History, and AP Englishes. These are all much harder than their regular honor equivalents. A few definitions to be familiar with are dress codes, a set of rules usually written and posted specifying the required manner of dress at a school or professional institution. Mental health, a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being, and the abbreviation AP, meaning advanced placement. As seen by this visual, adapted from Gear Strangers and Amaral's School-Based Health Centers and Academic Performance, What is the Intersection, April 2004 meeting proceedings, there is a clear connection between mental health and academic performance. If dress code can help and not hurt mental health, then academic outcomes should improve. To test my question, I use a mix of correlational study with the use of surveys and a content analysis. My first step was to create a survey that altered typical mental health screening questions to focus more on dress code. For example, the survey had questions that ranged from, in your opinion, how strict is your school's dress code, to questions like, does worry or anxiety about the dress code interfere with your AP classes, and do they make it hard to concentrate on school? The survey was then sent directly to AP teachers that taught AP Literature, AP Language, AP Seminar, and AP Research. These teachers then sent the survey out to their female students. At this point, I had a few assumptions and hypotheses. The greatest assumption that I had was that I would be able to find enough students willing to participate that met the requirements of being female and taking these specific AP classes. If this was met, I hypothesized that the stricter the dress code, the more negatively affected the mental health of the AP students would be. To prove this, my next steps consisted of compiling the answers to gain an average for each school for each question. And I hoped that comparing these results would show a correlation between the strictness of the dress code and the mental health of the students. So I chose these 3 questions specifically because I felt like they showed the most overall mental health effects of the students that took my survey. I chose how strict the school's dress code is in your opinion, how does the worry and anxiety interfere with AP classes, and how it affects the concentration in school in general. As you can see, I averaged the points I averaged the numbers that the students put in on a Likert scale for each question and put them in order from least to greatest. So for the first two questions, every single school ranked the same, stayed in the same space between the two questions. And then on the third question, only 5 schools stayed in that space: Northview, Verdugo Hills, Fairview High School, Massapequa, and Tomball Memorial. Looking at these 5 specific schools, I decided to look at these dress codes instead of going through and looking at all of them to really show the difference in the dress codes in those schools. To start with Northview, as you can see, they have a very small dress code with only 4 specific rules stated in their handbook. Verdugo Hills has 8. Fairview also has 8. Massapequa has 7. And Tomball has 6. But those 6, as you can see, the 6th one is an accumulation of a bunch of separate rules that other schools separated. Looking at these, you can see words that are not very specific. There are a lot of words like modest and to the principal's liking. And I believe this is the reason why these dress codes, these like lower dress codes, were rated so strict, just because there's no set rules on how the students should dress, because it's up to the principal's opinion or the teacher's interpretation. So looking at the results of my survey, this graph shows that most of the people who responded to my survey are seniors, with juniors next and then sophomores. So this is just an overall graph that shows a more in-depth look at the previous one that shows how many classes each grade took. As you can see, seniors took the most, with most seniors taking 6 classes compared to the other 2 grades. And also the amount of results that I got from each school varied greatly. As you can see, Fairview had the most results with 9. And from there, I had very varying numbers, but most of the schools that I got only got 1 response. These 3 graphs show my limitations. I did only get 35 responses, which was meaning a fairly small sample size, and some of the responses I could not use because the students identified as, well, while their birth certificate may have said female, they identified as something else, and they either didn't take AP classes or they didn't answer all of the questions asked. There is a slight bias because I am a female taking AP classes, and it's something that affects me personally. Seniors, who, as you can see, were the most people who responded, also have the stress of colleges and scholarships and becoming adults. And I only got singular responses from most of the schools, meaning that I could not accurately average how their students perceived the dress code and the other questions. So it is biased towards one student on those. For future directions, I would spend more time looking at the dress code specifically, because I believe that there are, like Tomball specifically, this one should be separated into more than 6 specific rules, and other ones have like repeating rules over and over again. And I would specifically look at words that pertain specifically to like teacher's opinion or things like that. I would also try to get more responses, because I believe having more responses from each school specifically would give me more of an average, and I believe that I would have more than 5 schools that I could look at dress codes, because the other schools would have stayed consistent as well. And we're excited.
How did the choices you made when designing or implementing your research method impact your research process?
So in the very beginning, so the way that I did this was completely different. I wanted to look at specific schools and look at how the dress codes, starting with dress codes instead of starting with students. And I believe that while that may have gotten me closer to the outcome that I was going towards in the beginning, it also hindered me greatly because I was not getting access to those schools. And so it took me a while to like come to terms with that and being able to switch how I did my method and how I like progressed my research that way.
Second question. How do your findings provide directions for future research in this field?
So most of my findings really like relates to those 5 specific schools. And so I believe that someone who is more qualified than I am in like psychology and can actually diagnose mental health and is more knowledgeable on that subject can go into the other questions that I had asked these students and really see if like dress code is that main factor or if there's other things that's also affecting them that way.
Micah, think back to the initial curiosity that sparked your inquiry. What other curiosities do you have, and how has this process prepared you to explore them? So this process really made me realize how hard it is for like surveys to really be answered for other people. And so like mainly I learned that being persistent is such an important thing when it comes to getting things out to anyone. And so really with all the other topics that I was interested in the very beginning, like sex education or just general like AP classes, I think just learning that persistence was really going to be helpful either in surveys or just in life in general. All right, thank you so much. All right, the floor is open for additional questions.
Or can it be like a statement? Like, does it have to be a question?
No, it could be a statement.
Okay, we all have concluded that what you said about like the dress code being to the principal's liking or modest, that was really gross.
Yeah.
Just Fairview, that was gross.
Fairview actually has more specific, but there are a few bits and pieces in there that are like, that could be seen as specific in some eyes and could be seen as opinionated in others.
Yeah, it was interesting to see like when you, because I don't know that I've ever thought about, you know, things like appropriate, modest, you know, those words that I'm, you know, we were talking about, like, what is it, like, we need to be specific. So that was really interesting to see. Did you run into, did you just pick these sort of at random, or, because I'm wondering about the difference between dress code where there's not a uniform. Does that make, sorry, that's still your thing, sorry. But I'm thinking of like, you know, schools that have khakis and polo shirts or whatever.
So my original like thing that I wanted to do was to look at uniform schools versus like other schools that had like a more varying dress code. But most of the uniform schools that I contacted did not get back to me, and if I did get in contact with their AP teachers, they did not get back to me, and so it ended up becoming very limited on like what dress codes I had access to and what schools I had access to.
Gotcha.
Are any of the schools up here, are they like private or religiously affiliated or like Army? What is the word? Military-based school, there we go.
Military, army,
Thank you, yes.
I want to say that the only one that like off the top of my head that I can remember that is, I want to say is Tomball Memorial, because I believe that I think it's military.
That would be stressful.
Yeah. And then also Verdugo Hills, they are in California, and they had a very, it wasn't technically affiliated, but based on their like website, you can infer that they are very heavily like a Christian-based school, but they didn't say it like outright.
Micah, you may have already said this, but are there any up there that had a lack of a dress code, or there was no dress code?
So none of these schools did not, so all of these schools did have dress codes, and I did also want to look at schools that did not have dress codes, but yeah. There's several. Yeah.
Yes, any other questions? Okay, all right, Henry, you'll be up at 11, so we've got about 20 minutes.